Let me start this way. We are in a series called The 47-Day Question. I'll explain that more in just a minute, especially if you're here for the first time and you're kind of jumping in the middle of the movie, so to speak. But we, one of the things that I've been encouraging, really kind of the premise of this series, is to learn how to be the kind of people who are always willing to ask good questions, but while remaining open and honestly and sincerely looking for answers, because I think that's a dynamic that we're missing in today's world, especially in American culture today. I mean, I think one of the problems, I really do, I honestly believe that one of the primary issues that we have, that we struggle with in America, why we feel so divided, is because we don't do this very well. We're not really good at being willing to honestly ask questions and really try to get feedback and look for answers. We just don't. Instead, I think, and this is a little tongue-in-cheek, so just bear with me, but I think this maybe is a little bit more familiar. The approach that we take, these days, it's more like this. Hey, Facebook. Hey, Facebook world. I don't usually share things like this on social media, but I just feel the responsibility and the duty to actually share this with you and let you know why I'm right and you're dumb. And I just need to tell you, because what I've got to tell you is actually the truth. And by the way, yes, of course, you can comment and you can respond back. This is healthy dialogue after all. But do know that I'm not actually listening. Because after all, I'm right. Remember? And that's a little tongue-in-cheek, maybe a little sarcastic, but I think we probably know that it's not really too far from the truth these days, that more often than not, that tends to be the approach that people take. It's like, well, I know the answers, and I've got the right thing, or the way that my view is, or my perspective, and I need to share that with you to tell you why you're wrong. And we're not actually doing any listening. We're not really dialoguing. We're not really looking for answers. And here's the thing. I think that's not only unhealthy, but I think it's a dangerous way to go through life. Why? Because ultimately it doesn't sway anybody. It divides more than it unites. Matter of fact, I think it creates greater division. And it ends up damaging and hurting relationships altogether. And I think that's a really unhealthy way to go through life. Now, here's the thing. I think that applies to every area of our lives, every arena of our lives, when it comes to politics and, religious beliefs and, racial issues, all those hot button topics. It applies to all of that. So we would do really good to learn how to be these kinds of people that ask good questions, but really are sincere about looking for answers. I think that's important. But that's not really all that this series is about. Really, what we're talking about is how important this is when it comes to a relationship with Jesus. When it comes to knowing Jesus and understanding who he is and what faith is and what Christianity is, really, it's so important to take this approach. And here's the thing. Taking this approach won't necessarily mean you're the smartest person in the room. It's not going to make you the most intellectual person in the room. It's not going to make you the person with the greatest education, and the greatest knowledge and understanding. Instead, here's what it will promise to do. It will make you wise. And this is what we've said the last couple of weeks. A truly wise person is someone who does this. They're willing to ask good questions with an open and honest desire to learn and to understand. I'm just telling you, when that is our approach, we will end up a much wiser person. We might realize that there's a lot of doubts and there's a lot of questions and there's a lot of things that we can't get answered when we approach it this way, but I promise you will be the wiser for it. It will be a better version of you. And so what we've been doing is we've really just been asking one question in this series, and that's why we call it the 47-day question, because while there's a lot of questions, when you take this approach, what you'll realize real quick is there really are a lot of things that I'm never going to get answered, that I can't figure out, that I don't fully understand. That's just kind of the way it goes. But I've said that's okay. That's really good news when you take this approach, because ultimately there's really only one question that you've got to answer. This is the one that matters more than anything else. And the question is, who is Jesus? And that's really what I, kind of unveiled last week and tried to unpack a little bit. The question that we all should be asking is, who is Jesus? You see, there was a period of time, and this is why we call it the 47-day question, because there was a period of time between when Jesus came into Jerusalem for the last time and then when he ascended into heaven. There was a period of about 47 days that we have recorded in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And it was during this period of time, this little window, that something significant took place, but not just to Jesus, because it's like, well, that's the obvious one. It's something significant happened to Jesus' disciples, and here's what I believe it was. They got this question answered with confidence. This one question. They still had a whole lot of things that they didn't understand. And Jesus, how is this working? We don't understand. You have kind of thrown us for a loop here. But something happened that caused them to be confident about answering this question. And here's why I say this. This is really good news for you and me. This is kind of one of the things I stated last week. This is really good news because it means that you don't have to get all of your questions answered, and you can still struggle a little bit with some doubts about things. That is okay, even when you have faith in Jesus. Faith in Jesus can begin by just answering this one question. Just this question, your faith can start. Now, that's where we've said, but that's what we said last week. But today, I really want to focus in on this right here, the can begin part. Because it's not an automatic. See, we like to, the way that we approach things, come on, we are logical, rational human beings. And so we like things to be like just, figured out, to be packaged nicely. Well, as long as I get all the questions answered and I can see things and I can make sense of it, then I can have this really strong faith. But the truth is, what the disciples did is they just got this one question answered, and then they had really strong faith, and it wasn't the other way around. They still had all the weird questions and some of the doubts. They didn't have everything figured out, but they had this question answered. And here's the thing. It can start for you this way. Faith can begin, and as a matter of fact, by answering this question, it doesn't matter what answer you get when you answer this question. You know what? It'll still take faith. It still requires a step of faith. And it doesn't matter. Maybe your answer is, hey, Jesus, I've discovered. Who's Jesus? Well, Jesus is the Son of God, and I really believe that. But some of you may, as you're asking this question, you may get to the point where you're thinking, I just don't know. I think Jesus was just a random, Jewish rabbi who got himself killed. Here's the thing. Either way, it will require faith to believe it. Do you see what I'm saying? It will require faith to believe it. Now, it's a little bit of a leap of faith. It's a step of faith. Now, here's the thing. This is why this is so important, and this is why I'm going to talk about this today. This word right here, faith. Because faith is fundamental. It may sound very elementary. It may sound like, come on, like I knew that back in Vacation Bible School when I was a kid. It may sound simplistic, but here's why this is so extremely important, because there's actually a lot of confusion around faith. But faith is actually the prerequisite, the only one when it comes to a relationship with God. Faith. Faith is that's why this is so important to talk about, because nothing else, it's not your intellect, it's not your knowledge, it's not getting all your questions answered, it's not your IQ, it's not how well you know the Greek and the Hebrew, it doesn't matter. Ultimately, what it boils down to is a relationship with God is based on faith. Now, faith meaning not like the Christian faith, as in like a noun. We're talking like faith as in something you exercise, as in, I'm pointing my faith. I am placing my faith. This is something that is active. It is something that is inside you. It is matter of fact, in John's gospel, the only tense that he uses the word faith in the Greek is a verb. It's an action. It's always a believing. It's more than just this faith. I have a faith. But it's an action. And here's the thing. I think for you and me this is kind of what we struggle with a little bit. And because maybe you've had this question before. Why does it require faith? Like, why does it have to be a faith thing? Have you ever thought that? Like, wouldn't there be like an easier way to do this? If God really is God, and if God really could do anything he wanted to and could approach this, I mean, there's a gazillion, God versions of his relationship with his created beings. Like, why faith? I mean, couldn't it be like something a little bit easier? If he really wants, I mean, if you thought, think about this. If God really wants you and me to know him and to trust in him, why make it a faith-based relationship? Because that sounds more difficult. I mean, why couldn't he just like show up and say, well, here I am. I am here. I'm God. Do you trust me now? Do you believe me now? Do you hear me now? It seems like that would be so much easier. And so we tend to think that maybe it was like this accidental thing, like why faith? I don't know. Maybe it was just because there wasn't another option. But here's the thing. This is what we need to understand about faith. It was God's plan from the beginning. It wasn't like in the beginning, Adam and Eve, they had everything perfect and figured out, but then they messed up and they sinned. And so God had to, I guess we'll resort to plan B. I guess we'll have to go the faith route. The thing is, this has always been the approach. This has always been the plan from the very beginning. Before creation itself, God knew that faith was always going to be required. Why? Why? Because faith ultimately is this. It's an expression of dependence on God. See, we tend to think of faith as something we have to like muster up. It's like, faith is like believing in something I can't see. You ever thought that? That's faith. Faith is believing in something I can't see. But the truth is, that's not really it at all. Faith, if I say, I'm going to put my faith in you for something. If I say I'm going to put my faith in you, what am I meaning? It means I'm trusting you in some way. I'm leaning on you in some area and expecting you to be able to follow through. And so that's like an expression of dependence. I'm depending on you for this. And so faith in God is the ultimate expression of dependence on God. And it has to. As a matter of fact, think about it this way. Anything other than God has to express dependence on God. Otherwise, if you choose not to put your faith in God, you just need to understand this, because this is what you're saying. To say, I'm not putting my faith in God, is to essentially say that there is something or someone that is greater than God or worth putting trust in God more than God himself. That's what it's saying. So faith is the requirement because it is the very nature of a relationship with God. It has to be faith because faith is saying, God, I depend on you completely. I recognize who you are, that you are God. There's nothing greater than you, and so everything other than you has to depend on you. That's faith. That's why it's so important. And see, we miss that. And so I want us to look back within this 47-day window. We're going to be right towards the end of John's gospel, and he records a lot of these events that took place after the death and the resurrection of Jesus, or the supposed resurrection. That's what some of us would think, right? And that's okay. It's when they found the tomb empty, and that's where we landed last week. Peter and John had run out to the tomb because they got news from these ladies that, some of the women disciples who had been Jesus followers, they had gone there early in the day to fix what the guys had done in the tomb and, with the body of Jesus, and they found that he wasn't there. And they came back and they told all the disciples that, hey, he's not there. Jesus is alive. Of course, Peter and John are like, oh, really? They take off, they run to the tomb, they find it empty, and then they walk away and they're just not real sure. They're wondering, what could have happened? They're hopeful, maybe, but come on. Really? Really? Is that really the experience? I mean, you and I have trouble with that too. But then John records for us, and John was one of the ones that was there. And he says that later that day, so that same Sunday, they're all huddled. The disciples are now in a room with like no windows and doors locked. They're on this interior room, and they're huddled together. They're being quiet. Why? But they're not having like an incredible prayer service. They're worried that they're going to be found out because look what happened to Jesus. That could happen to them. They lack faith in this moment. And yet, John records for us, and he says, Jesus appears to them. Now, the reason you and I struggle with that is because we've never experienced that. I mean, let's be honest. That's hard for us to imagine because, well, we've never witnessed that before. I've never had somebody just like appear in a room before. And therefore, since I've not experienced that, it's really difficult for me to just believe it, right? And yet, this is what they record. This is what they say happened. Well, of course, like you and me, Thomas, one of the disciples, wasn't there. And so when they tell Thomas, you won't believe it, we have seen the Lord, he's alive. And here's Thomas' response. You've heard this before probably. Unless I see the nail marks in his hands and put my finger where the nails were and put my hand into his side, I will not believe. In other words, he's like you and me. It's like, guys, I mean, I believe what you're saying. Like, I know that you believe that anyway, but I just don't know that I can buy that. You ever felt that way about something? And we give Thomas a hard time. Matter of fact, he ended up with this nickname, Doubting Thomas, over the years, kind of just traditionally over the last 2,000 years. And yet, the truth is, we have a tendency to do this. Why? Because we think what? We feel like if we could just see something, then we could believe it. That's always what we're thinking. I don't know. I need to see it for myself. I need to see it for myself. But let me just ask you this. Does seeing always grow your faith? Let's think about that. Does seeing always grow your faith? Think about this. I mean, have you ever watched any David Blaine videos? Anybody? He's an illusionist. You know, he's like a magician or whatever, and he does some incredible things. I'm just telling you, like, spooky. Super spooky. You watch, and it's like, there's seriously no way that wasn't real. And you watch, and something will hover. And these people are standing there, and there's no strings, and you're watching something hover. Does anybody in here in that moment go, it must be true? I mean, I'm seeing it. There's no illusion. I'm just telling you, it's like there's some voodoo stuff going on here. Like, he made this happen. This is real. Anybody? Or there's just something you just don't understand. Seeing doesn't always produce faith. It doesn't always grow your faith. I mean, if anybody was going to grow their faith based on what they saw, it'd be the disciples. I said this last week. I mean, of all the things they had seen and witnessed and experienced for themselves, you would think they would have no struggle with faith whatsoever. Like, this would be easy to go on believing that Jesus really is the Messiah, Son of the living God, and yet they were struggling. Well, a week later, this is what John records for us. A week later, his disciples were in the house again, and Thomas, this time he was there with them, and though the doors were locked, you make sure, let me just tell you guys, I'm telling you it's freaky, but the doors were locked, and Jesus came and stood among them, us, because he was one of them, and he said, peace be with you, you know, the ultimate understatement. Peace be with you. Don't freak out. And the thing is, Thomas is there this time, and Jesus goes right up to Thomas. You know what he tells him? He doesn't rebuke him for not believing or for not having enough faith. He goes up to Thomas and he says, put your finger here. See my hands. Reach out your hand. Put it in my side. In other words, I recognize, Thomas, that you think by seeing you're going to believe. And I know you think you need that. And in this moment, that's what he allows to happen. But I think it's in order to teach something about faith. Because he says, you know, just go ahead and touch these wounds. You'll see. You'll see for yourself. And he says, so stop doubting and believe. In other words, this was like a command statement. And the literal translation I love is do not be unbelieving, but believing. That's the actual literal translation. It's like, don't be unbelieving, be believing. Do you see how it's this verb? It's this, like, be believing. In other words, there's this sense that it is a decision. It's a choice. You can choose to believe. And in other words, now there's no implication here that Jesus is sitting here thinking, well, I've revealed myself to you physically, therefore I'm going to do that for the next, forever. Matter of fact, from this point forward, just a few other people witnessed Jesus himself, and yet from then on for the last 2,000 years, nobody else has gotten to experience a physical resurrected Jesus. Like that he's really here in front. And so So surely Jesus isn't saying, since you have seen, therefore you can choose to believe. He's just saying, well, I know that that's what it took for you. And sure enough, I mean, in that moment, Thomas is like, yeah, my Lord, my God. And Jesus tells him, but let me tell y'all something about what faith really is. You have seen me, and so you've believed, but blessed are those who have not seen and yet have still believed. Why? Because either way, it's a choice. Either way, it's a choice. Watch this. There's no guarantee that if Jesus walked into your bedroom tonight, even though you've never bought it before, you hadn't believed this junk all your life, all this Christian stuff and all the traditions, and you hadn't bought it. Jesus could show up in your room tonight and say, look, it's me, I'm Jesus. And you would go, David Blaine's behind this. I don't know about this. You could just as easily choose in that moment not to believe what you're seeing. You wouldn't even believe your own eyes. And so it's just as important to believe what you think you see versus what you don't see at all. And he's just saying it's much more blessed. There's greater value. It is somehow much more significant that you choose to put faith in a heavenly Father who you have not seen. That's why faith was the plan from the beginning, because there's something greater about this. Because our rational minds that he knows, that he gave us, that he's not saying, I want you to be ignorant. I want you to ignore what's obvious. I don't want you to think, don't use your brain. He's not saying that at all. He's saying, I just want you to know that seeing is not always believing. So you're going to have to choose at some point whether or not you're going to put your faith in me. And there is great significance when we're willing to do that. And so then John reveals the why. Here's why I'm recording this. He says, Jesus performed many other signs in the presence of his disciples. This wasn't the only thing. It wasn't just the fact that he popped into a room. There were some other things that weren't even recorded, which are not recorded in this book. But these, the ones that I've written down, are written so that you may believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, and that by believing, you may have life in his name. It is by believing that everything begins for you. You see, this is important because this is what I don't want us to miss. John wrote these things down to give us an opportunity to begin a relationship with Jesus based on what? Based on faith. That's what I heard. He said, faith. That's what I heard. Based on faith. So here's the way I think about it. Think about it this way. Think about it this way. Faith is like a house. Okay? Faith is like a house. And in order to build a house, and I'm no rocket surgeon, so, I don't know everything, but I'm pretty sure that when you build a house, there are some very simple, very basic things that have to happen first. What? You need a foundation, period. And I mean, there's not a whole lot that goes into it. It's just solid. Some footings, some concrete, some rebar, and that's about it. And but it gives you a solid foundation. In other words, there's something very simple that has to happen first. And in a faith-based relationship, in order to grow faith, it's not about seeing all the right things. It's not about having all your all of your questions answered and your doubts done away with. It means just answering the one question, who's Jesus? And when you begin with that, in other words, I think in this moment, Jesus is saying, it's not about, Thomas, and everybody else, you and me, it's not believing everything. I'm not telling you that you've just got to be ignorant and walk around, without any sense to you. I'm saying that in order to begin growing your faith in me, it just starts with me. Jesus. Just Jesus. That's the foundation. That's why you don't look any further. Like if you're trying to get all of your questions answered in order to get to faith, your faith will crumble. You've seen it happen in people's lives. If your faith is based on anything other than Jesus, it will fall apart. If your faith is based on your experiences, If your faith is based on some miracles that you think you've seen and witnessed, if your faith is based on an emotional moment or some feelings, all those things feel good sometimes, but if your faith is based there, if that's the foundation of your faith, it will fall apart. If it's based on how you interpret circumstances, whether they're good or bad, whatever it is, if it's anything other than Jesus that you're putting your faith on, it will fall apart eventually. You've seen it happen in people's lives all the time. The foundation of faith has to be Jesus. Which is why this is kind of my version of the so that, of why he's written this. So that you and I would know how to answer this question, who is Jesus? No other questions, just this one. So that you and I would be able to choose to believe that Jesus is the Son of God. It's a choice. It just is. It's not been scientifically proven to anybody here. How do you prove something scientifically? Has to be observable and repeatable. Has anybody observed a physical risen Jesus? Probably not. If you have, I would love to talk to you. I'm telling you, I would love to meet you and pick your brain a little bit. Probably, though, none of us have. So it's not about getting something proven. This is about faith in either direction. I don't want us to miss this. This is why this is so important. It's this 47-day question. Who is Jesus? Because it takes answering that question to begin faith. Nothing else. Just this question. Who is Jesus? Once you've answered this question, then your next step is faith, period. And it doesn't happen out of order. This isn't just blindly saying, well, I'll just kind of go with what the guy with the microphone says. Well, this feels really good, or this feels really exciting, and so I think I'll just kind of go in this direction. That's not faith. That feels like it, but that will fall flat at some point because those things don't stay. What stays? What exists? Jesus. Jesus is and has to be the foundation of your faith. Your faith relationship with a heavenly Father has to be based on who is Jesus. On who is Jesus. And then you've got to decide at that point. You can't it doesn't do any good just to answer the question. Then you have to take a step of faith. And I'm just telling you, even if you choose not to believe it, even if you choose that, Jesus isn't really who he says he is, not buying it, great. It still requires faith. I'm just telling you, that is still a step of faith. That's a scary thought, isn't it? Hope I get it right. I hope you do too. I'm not trying to convince you of anything. I'm just telling you, I can't. It's faith. Requires a step of faith. It just does. And so I think Jesus is saying to you and me, what are you waiting for? Stop doubting and believe. Stop doubting and believe. Don't be unbelieving. Just don't. Well, I just am. I'm not sure I buy all this. Okay. You can still choose to believe. Isn't that weird? Well, that's weird. I thought I had to figure it out and get it, No, you're not going to figure it out. This is a faith thing. This is a step in that direction. And I'm telling you, if you begin there, because faith is ultimately what? It's not just saying, okay, I kind of believe that. It's believing it, and then faith is dependence. It's that expression of dependence. It's saying, I choose to believe in you, and I'm putting my faith in you. Big difference. You can believe something without putting your dependence on it. And the same is true of a relationship with Jesus. It's a step of faith because it's saying, I'm just letting go. And it's utter, complete dependence. It's saying, I don't have all the questions answered, and I've still got some things, some hang-ups, some issues, but I'm just telling you, God, I'm just letting go. Can we just do that? Stop doubting. Believe. And this is something that I've said, this is the way I've put this over the last few years, and I couldn't come up with a better way to say it, so I'm just going to say it this way again. Faith is a step you can take because it's a decision you can make. Faith is a decision. Have you ever heard the idea that love is a choice? Love isn't a feeling. It's not, the ooey gooeys. It's not, some sort of cosmic, aligning of the stars. Like, love is a decision, which is why Jesus said, love your enemies. How do I do that? Because you can choose to love them. That's why. Faith is like that. It's a choice. You can choose this. Isn't that interesting? I'm not even suggesting that you choose to believe it all at this point. I'm just suggesting that you stop doubting and believe in Jesus and put your faith in Him today. That's the next step, faith. The next step is faith. One way or the other, however you answer the question, the step is faith. My hope for you is that it's a step of faith in God's direction. Will you pray with me? I just want to invite some of you who know it is time for you to make that decision. You have been waiting for too long, and like right now, this is the time to wake up and to commit yourself and just to say, God, I am letting go. I've been trying to do it on my own for far too long, and so I am just going to express my dependence. I've got so many questions. I don't have things figured out, and I don't know how to do this on my own, but I'm just telling you, I have got to build my faith on something else, and it's going to be Jesus. Can I invite you to pray with me right where you are? Just to pray in your heart, something like this. Heavenly Father, I need you. I'm expressing my need for you right now. I am dependent on you completely. I'm going to put my trust in you. I'm choosing to do that today. I'm choosing to believe that Jesus is my Lord and my Savior. Because one thing I do know, I can't do this on my own. I know where that has gotten me at this point. And I need a different foundation, and I believe it's Jesus. And so I am submitting myself to you today, putting my trust in you today, and I want to give you my life, everything that I have, everything that is within me. And would you fill me with your Spirit? Guide me, direct me. I give you my life. I put my faith in you. In Jesus' name, amen.